Doing hard things is not about strength. It's about training your mind to stop running from discomfort. Every breakthrough begins the moment your brain learns to sit with difficulty instead of avoiding it. This book will teach you that skill, the ability to stay focused, stay calm, and stay committed when your mind wants the easy escape. If you learn this, you change everything. Your habits, your discipline, your future. So stay with me. And make sure you subscribe, because what you're about to learn will reshape the way you think and the way you rise above every challenge ahead. Chapter 1. The Mental Construction of Difficulty. Difficulty is not a physical force. It is a mental construction, a shape your mind gives to discomfort, long before your body feels the weight of it. Some people face the smallest challenge and feel overwhelmed. Others walk through storms with a sense of calm purpose. The difference is not talent, not intelligence, not luck. The difference is the meaning their mind has built around the idea of hard. Your brain builds this meaning from the experiences you've lived, the fears you've carried, the habits you've repeated, and the stories you've told yourself about what you can and cannot handle. This meaning becomes the lens through which every challenge is judged, a lens that magnifies fear or magnifies possibility. When a task feels hard, your brain is not reacting to the task itself. It is reacting to the thoughts, memories, and emotions attached to that task. Hard things feel hard because your mind has given them weight. This is why two people can face the same obstacle and experience two completely different realities. One feels incapable, the other feels awakened. One sees a wall, the other sees a doorway. What your brain labels as too much is often simply unfamiliar, uncomfortable, or unpracticed. But the brain dislikes unfamiliar things. It prefers patterns it already understands, even if those patterns hold you back. Your brain resists hard things, not because you are weak, but because your brain is wired to protect you from anything uncertain. Difficulty, in the beginning, feels like danger, even when it is not. So the first enemy you fight is not the challenge itself. It is your brain's instinct to retreat. The mind whispers old warnings. This is too much. This will hurt. You might fail. These warnings feel like truth, but they are echoes of past versions of you who never had the tools you have now. And your brain keeps playing those echoes until you learn to silence them with a new internal language. To train your brain to do hard things, you must understand the architecture of difficulty, how it is built, where it begins, how it grows inside your perception. Hard things begin as emotional discomfort, a feeling in your chest, a tightening in your breath, a heaviness in your mind. Your brain interprets this discomfort as a threat. That interpretation shapes your response. Avoid, delay, escape, distract, postpone. You think you're avoiding the task, but in truth, you're avoiding the emotion the task produces. People don't fear the thing. They fear the feeling the thing brings. This is why mental construction matters. Because your brain is responding to a story instead of responding to reality. Hard things remain hard, as long as the story remains the same. But when you rewrite that story, difficulty begins to transform. Your brain learns to replace panic with presence, replace resistance with readiness, replace avoidance with intention. You begin to see difficulty differently, not as a threat, but as a signal that you are expanding, growing, stepping into new mental territory. Every challenge feels impossible until your brain becomes familiar with it. This is the secret athletes, creators, leaders, and resilient people understand. Your brain adapts to whatever you repeat, even discomfort, even pressure, even difficulty. What feels unbearable today becomes manageable tomorrow and becomes effortless one day. And if you keep showing up. The mental construction of difficulty rests on three pillars: perception, meaning, and conditioning. Perception shapes how big the challenge feels. Meaning shapes how deeply you believe you can handle it. Conditioning shapes how quickly your mind recovers when the challenge pushes back. When perception changes, difficulty shrinks. When meaning changes, difficulty feels purposeful. When conditioning changes, difficulty becomes fuel. This is how ordinary people become powerfully disciplined. They stop negotiating with discomfort. They begin leaning toward it instead of away from it. At first, the brain resists. It tenses. It complains. It looks for shortcuts, because the old wiring of the mind always pulls toward ease. Ease feels safe. Ease feels predictable. Ease feels familiar. But ease does not build strength. Ease does not build resilience. Ease does not build mastery. Growth is found on the other side of emotional friction. Every person who achieves anything extraordinary has learned to befriend that friction, not by eliminating the feeling, but by expanding their capacity to hold the feeling without breaking. Your brain can be trained to stop treating struggle as suffering and start treating struggle as shaping. Struggle shapes identity. Struggle strengthens character. Struggle awakens capacity you never knew you had. The mind must learn this truth through repetition and experience. You cannot think your way into a stronger mindset. You must act your way into it by practicing difficulty regularly. This practice rewires the mind. It slows your fear response. It elevates your tolerance for discomfort. It builds internal stability. Every repetition, rumties tonkum pitridi, tonkum salish, it stonkum ig will it tonkum surindu dictatum pitridi, turns fear into familiarity. Every attempt turns uncertainty into competence. Every small victory turns resistance into readiness. You are no longer held hostage by the instinct to avoid. This shift does not happen in one moment. It happens in layers. First, you begin noticing. When your mind labels something hard, you observe your reaction, your thoughts, your emotional posture. Then you choose not to accept the mind's first interpretation. You step closer instead of stepping away. This is the turning point. Not the moment of success, but the moment of approach. Approaching difficulty rewires the brain faster than avoiding it ever could. Avoidance strengthens fear. Approach strengthens courage. Courage is not a personality trait. It is a trained response, a conditioned willingness to move toward challenge. Even when discomfort rises, your brain adapts to what you repeatedly choose. If you repeatedly choose avoidance, your capacity shrinks. If you repeatedly choose challenge, your capacity expands. The expansion becomes visible in your behavior. You hesitate less. You commit faster. You endure longer. You recover quicker. You begin trusting yourself in moments where you once collapsed. This trust is transformative because your brain begins learning that you are capable of more than it previously believed. Belief alters performance long before skill does. When you believe you can handle difficulty, your brain stops searching for escape routes and starts searching for solutions. Solutions appear only when the mind is not in retreat. A retreating mind cannot see opportunity. A grounded mind can see clearly, even in discomfort. Training your brain to do hard things is ultimately training your brain to remain calm inside difficulty. Calm does not mean emotionless. Calm means centered. A centered mind does not collapse under pressure. It expands under pressure because it understands that pressure is not punishment. Pressure is preparation. Hard things break people when their mind interprets pressure as a sign they are not enough. Hard things build people when their mind interprets pressures as a sign they are becoming more. The mind becomes what it repeats. Your patterns become your identity. Your identity becomes your destiny. You are not born with the ability to do hard things. You build that ability, one repetition at a time. Difficulty is the door. Discomfort is the key. Consistency is the hand that turns it. Walk through that door long enough, and your brain will stop seeing it as a barrier. It will see it as home, and in that moment, you stop fearing hard things. You begin craving them, because you recognize that everything you want exists just beyond the edge. of your current comfort. This is the mental construction of difficulty, a structure built in the mind, shaped by perception, rewired through practice, and strengthened by every moment you refuse to retreat. Chapter 2. Rewriting the brain's response to stress. Stress is the body's oldest alarm system. It was designed to protect you, to warn you, to prepare you for survival. But the modern world triggers that same ancient alarm, even when your life is not in danger. A difficult task, a new challenge, a delayed deadline, an uncomfortable goal. Your brain reacts to these the same way it once reacted to predators and threats. Your heart speeds up, your muscles tense, your breath becomes shallow, your mind prepares for escape. This is why hard things feel harder than they are. Your brain does not see a challenge, it sees a threat. To train your brain to do hard things, you must teach it to respond differently to stress. Not by eliminating stress, but by transforming your relationship with it. Stress becomes harmful only when the brain believes, and it must avoid it. Stress becomes empowering when the brain learns it can move through it. This transformation begins when you understand that stress is not the enemy. Avoidance is. Presence teaches the brain that stress is manageable, that challenge is survivable, that discomfort is temporary. The shift begins quietly, with awareness. Most people experience stress as an automatic storm, a rush of sensations they don't understand and try to push away. But stress loses its power when you name it, observe it, and let it move through you. Instead of fighting it, awareness turns chaos into clarity. When you feel stress rising, you learn to pause, not to escape, but to understand. This pause is the birthplace of mental rewiring. Your brain expects you to react with fear or avoidance. But when you pause instead, your brain becomes confused. It begins searching for a new pattern, and this is where transformation begins. The old pattern was stress, raw fear, rewire, escape. The new pattern becomes stress, awareness, induction. This new sequence changes how your brain processes difficulty. Your nervous system starts learning that stress does not have to lead to withdrawal. It can lead to strength. Your capacity to handle hard things grows every time you step into stress, instead of away from it. But this requires teaching your mind to differentiate between pressure and danger. Pressure is uncomfortable, but it is not deadly. Pressure pushes you forward. Pressure grows you. Pressure shapes you. Danger is different. Danger requires escape. Danger requires protection. But your brain often confuses pressure with danger. It rings the same alarm for both, and you must retrain that alarm. You retrain it by experiencing stress consciously, consistently, and courageously, and until your brain learns that pressure is not death, it is development. This is why small doses of intentional discomfort transform people over time. When you take cold showers, push through workouts, wake up early, sit with boredom, resist instant gratification, you are not just building discipline, you are teaching your brain not to panic when discomfort rises. Every small act of controlled stress rewires your neural pathways. Your amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fear, becomes less reactive. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for focus and decision-making, becomes more active. This shift gives you something powerful, the ability to think clearly inside difficulty. Stress usually clouds the mind, but a trained brain thinks through it. This clarity is what separates those who fall apart under pressure from those who rise through it. Another key pattern to rewrite is the internal dialogue that stress awakens. When stress appears, the mind often repeats old lines. I can't handle this. This is too much. I'm not ready. These lines trigger your nervous system to shut down. But these lines are not truth. They are memories, echoes of old experiences your brain has stored as warnings. You must replace these echoes with a new internal voice, not a loud voice, not a dramatic voice, a steady, grounded voice. A voice that says, "This is pressure, not danger. I can breathe through this. This feeling will pass. I stay here." This new voice guides your nervous system back to stability. Stress becomes a wave instead of a threat. You ride it instead of drowning in it. Rewriting the brain's response to stress also requires understanding the physical side of stress. Your breath is the bridge between your mind and your body. When stress rises, your breath shortens, your body tightens, your energy spikes upward. You must reverse this pattern. Slow breath tells the brain, "We are safe." Relaxed body tells the brain, "There is no danger." Grounded energy tells the brain, "We can move forward." The brain listens to the body as much as the body listens to the brain. When the body remains calm during stress, the brain rewires faster. This is why practiced calm is a superpower. Calm is not the absence of stress. Calm is the ability. Calm is the ability to hold stress without breaking. People with trained minds do not eliminate pressure. They move through pressure with a different posture. They do not tighten. They open. They do not panic. They observe. They do not collapse. They remain centered. Centeredness under stress creates psychological endurance. Endurance creates growth. Growth creates transformation. This is how the brain rewrites itself. Another important layer involves your emotional memory. Your brain stores stressful experiences more strongly than peaceful ones. This is a survival mechanism. But when you revisit hard tasks with a new mindset, you override old memories with empowering ones. Your brain learns that you can survive pressure without falling apart. Eventually, your new memories become stronger than your old fears. This is why repetition matters so much. Every time you face stress intentionally, you build a new emotional archive, a library of resilience, a catalogue of proof. Proof that you can handle stress, proof that discomfort is temporary, proof that you do not break easily. This proof becomes a shield against future difficulty because the brain trusts what it has already survived. Rewriting the brain's response to stress also requires learning how to stay present. Stress pulls the mind into catastrophic futures. Presence pulls the mind back into the moment. Stress makes you imagine outcomes that haven't happened. Presence makes you deal with the reality in front of you. Reality is always smaller than your imagination. Stress magnifies everything. Presence reduces everything to its true size. This reduction is powerful. It turns mountains back into steps. It turns chaos back into clarity. Presence transforms stress, because stress cannot survive in a mind that is fully here. The brain rewrites itself. When you stop fighting the moment and start inhabiting it, you learn to feel discomfort without fleeing. You learn to witness emotions without collapsing. You learn to move forward without needing relief first. This is the essence, one of stress mastery. Not suppression, not avoidance, not control, integration. You integrate the feeling into your awareness and continue moving even while it is there. This trains your brain to coexist with discomfort instead of fearing it. The greatest transformation occurs when the brain realizes that discomfort is not a signal to stop, it is a signal to grow. Growth requires heat. Growth requires tension. Growth requires pressure. The mind becomes more resilient each time you step through stress and discover your strength on the other side. Rewriting the brain's response to stress is a journey of self-trust. Trust that you won't collapse. Trust that you can endure. Trust that you will adapt. And this trust cannot be taught with words. It is taught through experience, through repetition, through the quiet moments where you choose to stay when every part of you wants to run. These choices become the foundation of a stronger mind, a mind that sees stress not as a threat, but as a signal that something meaningful is being built within you. A mind that understands that discomfort is the doorway to capability. A mind that does not retreat at the first sign of pressure, but steps forward with steadiness, clarity, and grounded presence. This is how stress loses its power. This is how you rise above the reflex to escape hard things. This is how your brain learns to make difficulty a place of growth instead of fear. This is how you train your mind to meet challenges with calm, with strength, and with an inner voice that says, I stay, I move, I rise, and in that moment, stress becomes something it has never been before, a sign that you are on the edge of transformation. Chapter 3. The Science of Mental Endurance. Endurance is not just the ability to keep going, it is the ability to stay steady inside the very moments your mind begs you to stop. Mental endurance begins where comfort ends. Your brain is designed to conserve energy, to protect you from unnecessary exertion, to push you away from anything that feels demanding. This instinct once kept humans alive, but today it keeps people small. Mental endurance is the science of overriding this instinct. It is the process of teaching your brain that it can go further than the limits it has learned to obey. These limits are not physical walls. They are psychological ceilings, constructed from past experiences, fear conditioning, and emotional memory. When you try something difficult, your brain sends signals of discomfort. Long before your body reaches its true capacity, your brain says stop, not because you are incapable, but because the brain fears the unknown. Mental endurance is the ability to walk past that first internal barrier and discover that you have more in you than the mind allows you to see. This inner barrier is the most powerful limit in your life. Everyone who achieves extraordinary things learns to move beyond it. Endurance is not born from toughness. It is born from tolerance, the tolerance to sit with discomfort without interpreting it as danger, the tolerance to stay with a difficult task without needing immediate relief, the tolerance to push through emotional friction without collapsing into old habits. This tolerance is what separates those who persist from those who quit. Mental endurance has a biological foundation. In moments of difficulty, your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, begins to fatigue. As it tires, the emotional brain becomes louder. It whispers about quitting. It magnifies fear. It intensifies discomfort. The emotional brain does not care about your goals or your growth. Its only mission is to avoid pain. Mental endurance is the practice of keeping the rational brain online long enough to override the emotional noise. You build this ability through repeated exposure to manageable discomfort. Every time you resist the urge to quit, your rational brain strengthens. Every time you choose one more step, its circuitry rewires. Every time you endure longer than before, your threshold expands. This expansion becomes visible in ways you do not expect. You begin staying focused longer. You resist distractions more easily. You remain calm in challenging situations. You recover faster from emotional shocks. Your brain develops resilience, the ability to return to balance after stress. Resilience is one of the cornerstones of mental endurance. It allows you to push beyond difficulty without burning out, breaking down, or giving up. Resilience is developed through contrast. You expose yourself to controlled stress and then return to calm. You stretch yourself and then ground yourself. You test your limits and then rest your mind. This cycle strengthens your nervous system. It teaches you that effort does not threaten your survival. Effort becomes a normal state instead of a crisis. This shift in perception changes everything because the brain does not endure what it perceives as danger. It endures what it perceives as challenge. When you relabel difficulty as challenge, you activate the dopamine system, the reward circuitry. Dopamine does not only respond to success, it responds to effort. When you push through discomfort, Dopamine rises. This release tells your brain that the effort is meaningful. So the next time you face discomfort, your brain is less resistant. This is how mental endurance grows. Through the small biochemical victory, your brain barely notices, but deeply remembers. Mental endurance is also shaped by the stories you tell yourself. During difficulty, your brain listens to your internal narration more seriously than any external instruction. This internal tone keeps the emotional brain quiet. It delays panic. It gives your rational mind time to stay in control. Mental endurance depends heavily on emotional neutrality. Not positivity, not motivation. Neutrality. Neutrality removes drama. Drama feeds stress. Neutrality keeps effort clean. Clean effort lasts longer. When you approach difficulty without emotional exaggeration, your endurance increases automatically. Endurance is also connected to your ability to simplify tasks. The brain becomes overwhelmed when it looks too far ahead. Thinking about the entire journey drains motivation just before the first step. So mental endurance focuses not on distance, but on direction. Not on finishing, but on continuing. Not on outcome, but on the next moment. This reduces cognitive load. It quiets mental resistance. It keeps the brain steady inside effort. This is why people who accomplish great things often say they did not think about the whole task. They thought about the next breath, the next step, the next minute. The brain can endure anything in small pieces. It collapses only when burdened with the weight of the entire journey at once. Mental endurance also relies on something deeper, purpose. Purpose turns effort into meaning. When effort feels meaningful, the brain tolerates more discomfort. It stretches further. It holds longer. This is why people endure incredible hardship when the purpose is important enough. Family, survival, deeply desired goals, a promise they refuse to break. Purpose acts like internal fuel. Without purpose, endurance becomes torture. With purpose, endurance becomes transformation. Purpose does not eliminate difficulty. It just gives the difficulty a reason to exist. And the brain can endure what it understands. Another crucial component of mental endurance is recovery. Endurance is not built by non-stop effort. It is built by controlled effort and intentional recovery. Recovery is not quitting. Recovery is integration. Integration allows the brain to build stronger pathways from the challenge it survived. If you push without rest, the brain breaks. If you rest without pushing, the brain weakens. Endurance is the dance between pressure and relief. Each cycle makes you stronger. Over time, mental endurance becomes a state of identity. You stop feeling shocked by your own strength. You stop doubting your ability to continue. You begin expecting yourself to endure, and the brain rises to match that expectation. This identity forms quietly when you wake up early, despite tiredness. When you push through the last repetition. When you finish the work, even when your mind wants escape. When you choose consistency, one eyes ponto the taub you and tux fated coasts over comfort. These moments accumulate. They shape a new mental structure, one built on internal stability instead of emotional fragility. A structure that does not collapse under pressure because it has learned to stand inside pressure without trembling. The science of mental endurance is not about intensity. It is about staying. Staying when discomfort rises. Staying when anxiety whispers. Staying when effort stretches. Staying when the mind negotiates. The brain rewires when you stay longer than the old version of you would have stayed. That extra minute, that extra repetition, that extra push is where endurance grows. Not in the beginning of effort, not in the middle, but at the edge. The edge is the boundary between who you were and who you can become. And every time you cross that edge, you reshape your identity. This identity becomes the foundation of your future strength. A mentally enduring person is not someone who never feels tired. They are someone who keeps walking when tiredness arrives, because they have learned that the mind gives up long before the body does. They have learned that discomfort is not destruction. They have learned that quitting makes life harder, not easier. They have learned that endurance is freedom, freedom from emotional weakness, freedom from mental collapse, freedom from the patterns that once held them down. You become free when you can keep going, even when your mind tells you to stop. This is the science of mental endurance, the rewiring of your brain to move through difficulty with steadiness, clarity, and inner authority. And once your mind learns to endure, everything else in life becomes easier. Not because the challenges shrink, but because you rise above them with a stronger, deeper, more resilient mind. Chapter 4. Breaking the cycle of mental resistance. Mental resistance is the invisible force that holds you back long before failure ever arrives. It is subtle, quiet, and deeply rooted in the brain's desire for safety. Resistance is not laziness. Resistance is protection. Your brain thinks it's defending you from discomfort, from uncertainty, from effort, even when that protection is the very thing that traps you in the same patterns you're trying to escape. This resistance appears every time you try to start something meaningful. It appears when you want to change a habit, pursue a goal, take a risk, or push yourself into unfamiliar territory. The moment growth begins, resistance rises. Not because you're weak, but because your brain feels threatened by anything that requires energy, discipline, or emotional exposure. Resistance forms a cycle, a predictable psychological loop that repeats itself until you learn to interrupt it. The cycle begins with intention. You decide to do something hard, wake up early, train your body, study consistently, work without distraction, or build something you believe in. The intention feels strong at first, clear, purposeful, powerful, but then discomfort arrives. The brain senses pressure, and pressure signals danger. Danger activates the survival system, the part of the mind built to protect you from fear, pain, and emotional strain. This survival system responds with the most effective tool it has: resistance. Resistance pulls you away from anything that stretches you. It whispers that the task can wait. It convinces you the timing isn't right. It floods you with urges to escape into easier activities. The brain does not resist the task itself. It resists the emotional friction attached to the task. This friction is the turning point in every journey, the moment where most people retreat and return to comfort. Retreating creates relief. Relief teaches the brain that resistance works. So the brain strengthens the resistance pathway. Next time the same discomfort appears, resistance comes faster, stronger, louder. This becomes the cycle. Intention drew discomfort, resistance, avoidance, relief, reinforcement. The brain reinforces whatever feels safe, and avoidance feels safe. So the cycle becomes automatic. You don't even notice it happening. You just know that starting feels hard, continuing feels impossible, and finishing feels unreachable. Breaking this cycle requires understanding its mechanics. Resistance is not a wall. It is a reflex, a habit, a pattern built from years of choosing comfort over challenge. You break it not through force, but through awareness, through stepping into discomfort instead of retreating from it. The first interruption in the cycle is noticing resistance as it rises. Most people only feel the discomfort, not the moment resistance takes control. But when you begin to observe your internal signals, the hesitation, the tension, the urge to escape, you create a gap between the discomfort and your reaction. This gap is power. The survival brain reacts instantly, but the conscious brain can pause. In that pause, you choose differently. Resistance loses its force when you do not obey it. The brain expects avoidance. Avoidance is the familiar path, but when you act while resistance is still there, the brain becomes confused. It begins searching for a new pathway. This is how you weaken the old cycle, not by eliminating discomfort, but by refusing the relief that reinforces resistance. Every moment you move forward, while resistance is active, rewires your brain. This does not feel pleasant. It feels like friction, pressure, weight, but this friction is not the enemy. It is the breaking point of old neural pathways. New pathways form when you continue anyway. This continuation does not need to be intense. It only needs to be consistent. A few seconds of effort during resistance can change your entire identity, because the brain begins to realize you do not stop when discomfort rises. This realization creates a new cycle. Intention, draw, discomfort, presence, action, completion, confidence. Confidence replaces relief. Purpose replaces fear. Momentum replaces avoidance. Momentum is one of the biggest forces in breaking mental resistance. Resistance is strongest at the beginning of a task. Once you start, the brain shifts from protective mode to performance mode. It's the starting that feels heavy, but the brain cannot maintain resistance once the body is in motion. This is why small beginnings matter so much. Starting for 1 minute, one page, one step, one action breaks the psychological weight that feels impossible beforehand. The mind exaggerates the effort required. It inflates the size of the task until the beginning feels unbearable. But once action replaces hesitation, the brain updates its perception. What was feared is now familiar. Familiarity kills resistance. This is why repetition is the ultimate destroyer of resistance. Every time you start, despite discomfort, every time you continue, despite hesitation, your emotional tolerance increases. Every time you finish, despite friction, your identity expands. Identity is the final battlefield. Resistance thrives when you see yourself as someone who avoids hard things. Breaking the cycle requires becoming someone who does hard things even when you don't feel ready, motivated, or comfortable. Identity shifts through consistent action, not perfection, not intensity, consistency. Small, consistent actions reshape the brain faster than massive, inconsistent efforts. The brain trusts what it repeats. Repetition rewires belief. Belief rewires identity. Identity rewires behavior. This is how resistance loses its power, not through force, but through familiarity. When difficulty becomes familiar, resistance fades. Your brain stops reactive, as if you are in danger. It begins adapting, as if you are in training. Training creates resilience. Resilience creates momentum. Momentum creates self-respect. Self-respect destroys avoidance. Because a person who respects themselves does not abandon their commitments. Mental resistance also thrives in environments filled with distraction. Distraction offers instant reward. Hard things offer delayed reward. The brain always chooses the faster reward, unless you intervene. Intervention does not mean fighting impulses. It means removing choices that trigger resistance. You simplify the environment. You reduce the friction of starting. You build structures that support effort instead of sabotaging it. This removes the false battle between willpower and temptation. Because the more decisions you must make before doing a task, the more resistance grows. Breaking the cycle requires reducing decisions and increasing action. Action is clarity. Action is momentum. Action is identity shaping. Resistance cannot survive in a mind that acts quickly. The longer you think, the stronger resistance becomes. Thinking is where resistance breeds. Action is where resistance dies. Another key element in breaking mental resistance is emotional neutrality toward the task. When you attach too much emotion to the outcome, effort becomes heavier. You begin fearing failure, seeking perfection, or anticipating difficulty. Neutrality removes the emotional weight. It allows you to work without creating pressure. Pressure strengthens resistance. Neutrality weakens it. Neutrality means approaching tasks as simple actions, not dramatic challenges. This shift in emotional weight makes hard things feel lighter. The brain resists what feels overwhelming. The brain embraces what feels manageable. This is why calm effort lasts longer than motivated effort. Motivation spikes and crashes. Calm consistency sustains. Breaking mental resistance is the art of learning to stay calm inside discomfort, to stay focused inside hesitation, to stay committed inside fear. Fear is part of the cycle. Hesitation is part of the cycle. Discomfort is part of the cycle. None of these signals need to stop you. They only need to be understood as echoes of the old brain, the brain that believed comfort was safety and effort was danger. But you are training a new brain now, a brain that knows you can survive discomfort, you can endure pressure, you can push through friction. This new brain does not collapse at difficulty. It leans in, it stabilizes, it adapts. Resistance loses power when the brain finally understands that effort is not a threat to your survival. Effort is a pathway to your evolution. Every time you choose effort, you choose growth. Every time you choose growth, you shape a stronger identity. Every time your identity strengthens, resistance weakens. This is how you break the cycle. Motivation reacts to emotion. Discipline responds to intention. And intention is what transforms a scattered mind into a focused, grounded, capable force. Deep cognitive discipline is not about willpower. It is about wiring your brain to return to the task, return to the mission, return to the path, no matter how you feel. Emotions shift like weather. Discipline stands like a mountain. The first element of cognitive discipline is internal order. Your mind cannot remain disciplined if it remains chaotic. Chaos is the enemy of consistency. A scattered mind cannot hold direction. A distracted mind cannot build momentum. A conflicted mind cannot maintain commitment. Internal order begins with knowing what truly matters. When your brain sees too many priorities, it loses focus. And where focus collapses, discipline dies. But when your brain sees one path, one direction, one intention, discipline becomes natural. The mind obeys clarity. It resists confusion. This is why cognitive discipline is built by subtracting distractions, not by forcing more effort. You train your mind to stop chasing everything and start returning to the path you chose. The second element is emotional separation. A disciplined mind does not fuse emotion with action. Most people wait to feel ready. They wait for calm, wait for motivation, wait for the right mood. But a disciplined mind does not depend on emotional alignment. It acts regardless of mood. It moves regardless of anxiety. It continues regardless of resistance. This separation between emotion and action is one of the most powerful mental skills a person can develop, because emotions fluctuate based on sleep, stress, hormones, memories, and countless invisible factors. If your actions depend on your emotions, your life becomes unstable. But when action becomes independent, your life becomes powerful. The third element is the ability to sustain attention. Attention is the currency of achievement. Where your attention goes, your future grows. But in a world filled with constant stimulation, your attention is always under attack. Notifications, noise, impulses, habits built on instant reward, all of them fracture your focus and weaken your discipline. Deep cognitive discipline trains the mind to resist fragmentation. It teaches your brain to stay with a task long enough to cross the threshold where real progress begins. The first few minutes of focus are always the hardest. The brain resists, wanders, searches for escape. But if you push through that initial turbulence, the mind quiets. The fog lifts. A rhythm emerges. This rhythm is the gateway to deep work. Deep work is the realm where breakthroughs happen, where mastery develops, where your brain enters a state of complete immersion. A disciplined mind reaches this state more easily because it knows how to push through the noise without collapsing. The fourth element is self-command. Self-command is the ability to give yourself an instruction and follow it. Most people do not have this skill. They negotiate with themselves endlessly. They postpone tasks, bargain with comfort, and justify avoidance. But a disciplined mind does not negotiate. It directs, it decides, it follows through. Self-command is built slowly. It begins with small promises, not dramatic goals, not overwhelming commitments, small promises kept consistently. Your brain must learn that when you say "I will," you will. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, your identity strengthens. Every time you break a promise to yourself, your identity weakens. Identity is the foundation. 1.1.1.1.1 of cognitive discipline. A disciplined person acts disciplined because they believe they are disciplined. Your brain performs according to its identity. It behaves like the person you believe yourself to be. This means discipline is not something you force. It is something you become. The fifth element is delayed reward. The brain loves instant gratification. It hates waiting and hates uncertainty, hates slow progress. But all meaningful achievement requires delayed reward. A disciplined mind trains itself to crave the long-term outcome more than the short-term relief. This shift does not happen quickly. Your brain must experience the satisfaction of deep reward enough times to override the impulse for quick escape. When you feel the pride of finishing something hard, the fulfillment of consistency, the growth that comes from patience, your brain begins valuing long-term reward more than temporary comfort. This shift is one of the greatest transformation you can cultivate, because once your brain prefers growth over comfort, discipline becomes effortless. The sixth element is emotional endurance. Cognitive discipline is not only about keeping focus, but holding emotional stability when life becomes unpredictable. Stress, uncertainty, discomfort, these emotional waves often break discipline, but a disciplined mind does not collapse when emotion rises. It breathes through the wave. It allows the feeling to exist without letting it take control. This emotional endurance comes from repetition. Each time you remain steady inside discomfort, your tolerance grows. Each time you stay focused while uncomfortable, your emotional muscles strengthen. Deep discipline is not rigid. It is fluid. It bends but does not break. It adjusts without abandoning. This flexibility is what makes it sustainable. Rigid discipline shatters under pressure. Fluid discipline adapts and continues. The seventh element is internal narration. Your inner voice either strengthens discipline or destroys it. A disciplined mind does not speak to itself with chaos, panic, or emotional exaggeration. It uses steady language, simple language, clear language. I continue. I stay here. I do the next step. I finish what I started. This tone keeps the brain grounded. It prevents emotional storms from controlling your actions. Your internal narration shapes your mental endurance, and mental endurance shapes your discipline. The eighth element is structured consistency. Consistency is not built from gigantic effort. It is built from repeated effort that fits your life, your bandwidth, your emotional capacity. When you build consistency, when you around your natural rhythm, discipline becomes sustainable. A disciplined life is shaped by structure, not a rigid structure, but a supportive one, a structure that holds your focus, anchors your habits, and removes unnecessary friction. Friction kills discipline. Structure fuels it. The ninth element is self-restraint. The disciplined mind knows when to stop. It does not burn itself out in a rush of intensity. It does not operate in extremes. It applies effort where effort is needed and preserves energy where energy must be saved. This balance keeps discipline alive for years, not days, not weeks. A disciplined person thinks long-term. They do not chase the illusion of perfection. They chase longevity, because true discipline is not about intense days. It is about consistent years. The 10th and final element is self-respect. Self-respect is the fuel that sustains discipline when everything else wavers. A person who respects themselves does not abandon their commitments. They do not break their promises. They do not choose the easy path when the meaningful path requires effort. Self-respect is the foundation of every difficult decision. It is the quiet reminder that your life is shaped by the actions you take when no one is watching, when no one is expecting, when no one is applauding. Deep cognitive discipline is ultimately the art of taking yourself seriously, respecting your goals, respecting your time, respecting your path, respecting your evolution. You become disciplined the moment you realize you deserve the life that discipline creates. Discipline gives you freedom, freedom from your impulses, freedom from your fears, freedom from your old patterns, freedom from the version of you who settled for less. And once your brain understands that discipline is liberation, not punishment, your entire inner world shifts. You no longer force discipline, you embody it. And in that embodiment, you transform every part of your life. Chapter 6. Strengthening neural pathways for consistency. Consistency is not a personality trait. It is a neurological pattern, a structure built inside your brain through repetition, reinforcement, and emotional association. Most people fail to stay consistent, not because they are weak, but because their neural pathways are designed for interruption, not continuation. The brain repeats what is familiar, not what is beneficial. This means if your past is full of starting and stopping, your brain will default to starting and stopping. If your past is full of abandoning tasks halfway, your brain will expect to abandon tasks halfway. You are not inconsistent by nature. You are inconsistent by conditioning. To change your life, you must change your wiring. Neural pathways are the highways. Your thoughts, emotions, and actions follow. The more you use a pathway, the stronger it becomes. The less you use a pathway, the weaker it becomes. Consistency becomes easy only when the pathway for consistency is stronger than the pathway for quitting. This is why dramatic motivation fails. It tries to force action. On an untrained neural system, it demands intensity instead of building structure. Your brain does not respond to intensity. It responds to repetition, small repetition, frequent repetition, emotionally meaningful repetition. This is how you strengthen the neural loop of consistency. The first step is understanding the loop itself. Every behavior you repeat creates 3 internal reactions: a cue, a response, and a reward. This cycle forms the foundation of all habits, but consistency requires a deeper version of this cycle, not just repeating an action, but repeating the identity connected to the action. Your brain must believe that you are the kind of person who continues, who finishes, who persists. Identity is the glue that keeps consistency alive. Without identity, consistency collapses as soon as emotion drops. With identity, consistency survives, even when motivation disappears. To strengthen the neural pathways for consistency, you must repeatedly behave as the person you want to become, not occasionally, not on good days, every day. The brain rewires through frequency, not intensity. Doing a small task daily rewires the mind more effectively than doing a large task occasionally. Consistency grows by accumulating small victories. These victories are signals to the brain that you are stable, committed, and reliable. The brain loves reliability. Reliability reduces stress. It reduces decision fatigue. It reduces uncertainty. When your brain learns that your behavior is predictable, it stops fighting you. It stops resisting. It stops negotiating. It begins cooperating. This cooperation is what makes consistency feel easy. The next layer in strengthening neural pathways is reducing cognitive friction. Friction kills repetition. Anything that makes starting difficult tells the brain to avoid the task. Anything that simplifies starting tells the brain to approach it. The brain is not lazy. It is efficient. It always chooses the path that requires the least mental effort. If the environment required to be consistent feels heavy, cluttered, or complicated, your brain will resist the behavior. But if the environment feels simple, ready, and accessible, your brain will engage. This is why preparation is neurological training. When you prepare your tools, prepare your space, prepare your steps, you are preparing your brain. Prepared environment build consistent minds. The next element is emotional anchoring. The brain strengthens pathway connected to emotion. If a task creates positive emotional weight, the brain reinforces the behavior. If a task creates negative emotional weight, the brain avoids the behavior. This is why forcing yourself through tasks with resentment weakens consistency. The brain stores the emotion attached to the effort. Positive emotion creates magnetic behavior. Your brain returns to it without resistance. This is why self-compassion is a neurological strategy, not a motivational one. When you treat yourself well, during effort, your brain reinforces effort. Your emotional state when performing a task is just as important as the task itself. You train the brain to crave effort by removing emotional punishment and adding emotional clarity. The next layer is completion. The brain does not rewire from starting a task. It rewires from finishing it. Completion triggers a neurological reward response. Dopamine rises. Focus sharpens. Motivation increases. The brain begins associating completion with satisfaction instead of stress. When you finish tasks frequently, you teach the brain to chase completion. This is why finishing small tasks is more powerful than starting big ones. The brain needs proof that you complete what you begin. The more proof you give it, the stronger the pathway becomes. Completion builds confidence. Confidence builds identity. Identity builds consistency. The next element is repetition with variation. The brain does not like monotony. It needs familiarity, but also subtle change. Too much novelty creates stress. Too much repetition creates boredom. Consistency thrives in the middle. Repetition with small variations, stable paths with small updates, steady rhythms with slight adjustments. This keeps the brain engaged without overwhelming it. You build consistencies through structure, but you sustain consistency through novelty. The next layer is reducing emotional spikes. The brain struggles with consistency. When tasks produce extreme emotions, frustration, fear, excitement, anxiety, emotional spikes disrupt focus and interrupt behavioral patterns. A deeply consistent mind is emotionally steady. Steadiness allows repetition. Repetition strengthens pathways. Pathways create automatic behavior. Automatic behavior is the highest form of discipline. Not discipline that feels forced, but discipline that feels natural, automatic, effortless. You reach this level when your brain stops asking whether you will act and begins assuming that you will. Assumption is a neurological milestone. The brain no longer negotiates. It no longer resists. It no longer hesitates. It simply moves. This movement feels like alignment. Consistency becomes the default setting of your identity, not because you are trying harder, but because you are wired differently. The next element is the collapse of the quit path. Every brain has a neural pathway for quitting, a pattern built from past escapes, past avoidances, past breakdowns. To strengthen consistency, you must weaken the quit path. This happens every time you continue for just a few seconds after the moment you want to stop. Those few seconds matter. They interrupt the quit signal. They weaken the survival pattern. When you stay in the task slightly longer than the old version of you would have stayed, your brain updates its limit. The new limit becomes familiarity. Familiarity becomes comfort. Comfort becomes capability. This is the process that expands your endurance, your resilience, your identity. The final and deepest layer in strengthening neural pathways for consistency is belief, not blind belief. Neurological belief. The belief formed when you see yourself keep promises repeatedly. The belief formed when you witness your own resilience. The belief formed when you realize that your brain can be trained, reshaped, rewired, rebuilt. A person who believes they can remain consistent develops the neural structure that makes it real. The mind bends to match its belief, and once the belief is strong enough, consistency becomes inevitable. Not forced, not strained. Inevitable, because the identity of a consistent person produces consistent behavior without internal war. You break the war by training the brain. You train the brain by repeating the identity. And eventually, consistency becomes who you are. Not something you chase, not something you struggle for, but something you embody with quiet power. This is the beginning of a mind capable of doing hard things every day without collapsing, without negotiating, without hesitation. A mind built on strong pathways. A mind aligned with purpose. A mind trained to continue. Chapter 7. Training your brain to embrace discomfort. Discomfort is the doorway to every transformation you want in your life, but your brain has been trained, since childhood, to avoid that doorway at all costs. It avoids the cold, the unfamiliar, the difficult, the uncertain, the challenging, the emotionally heavy, the physically demanding. Your brain believes comfort equals safety, so anything that stretches you is labeled as danger. But growth lives in the territory your brain calls unsafe. Strength lives in the territory your brain tries to escape. Potential lives in the territory your brain has never explored. If you want to train your brain to do hard things, you must first train it to embrace discomfort. Not tolerate it, not survive it, embrace it. Welcome it as the signal that you are exactly where you need to be. Discomfort is not the enemy, it is the invitation. The invitation to evolve, the invitation to expand, the invitation to become someone your old self cannot imagine. But to reach that person, you must retrain a mind that is wired to run from pain. Your brain follows patterns. It does not choose discomfort naturally. It chooses familiarity, ease, and predictability. This is why repeating old behaviors feels easier than building new ones. The old pathways are smooth, wide, well-lit roads. The new pathways are narrow, overgrown, and rarely traveled. But every time you step into discomfort, you are clearing that path, leveling the ground, laying new pavement. Eventually, what once felt impossible becomes your new normal. This is how the mind changes. The first step is reframing discomfort as a sign of progress. When you feel the tension, the friction, the emotional resistance, it is the signal that you are entering new neural space. Your brain is not rejecting the task, it is adjusting to it, learning it, strengthening itself through it. Discomfort is simply the sound of your old identity, cracking open to make space for a stronger one. Once you understand this, discomfort stops feeling threatening, it begins feeling meaningful. The next step is exposure. You cannot embrace discomfort you never experience. Your brain cannot adapt to challenges you never face. Exposure means intentionally entering discomfort in small, controlled, repeatable ways, not overwhelming yourself, but nudging the boundary of what feels tolerable. This nudging teaches the nervous system that discomfort is temporary, not catastrophic. The more often you step in, the faster the fear response fades. Fear is loud only when discomfort is rare. When discomfort becomes familiar, fear loses its authority. The mind stops panicking inside discomfort and begins settling into it. This settling is the beginning of mastery. The next step is holding the moment. When discomfort rises, your instinct is to escape. Escape through distraction, through withdrawal, through excuses, through impulsive choices. But if you stay, just stay, your brain begins to change. It learns that you can feel discomfort without needing to run. It learns that discomfort peaks and then softens. It learns that you survive the intensity every single time. This is how emotional tolerance grows, not through force, but through staying. Staying builds capacity. Capacity builds confidence. Confidence transforms discomfort from something you fear into something you use. The next layer is breath. Breathing is your direct line to the nervous system. When discomfort rises, breath collapses. Your chest tightens. Your body braces for impact. This reaction tells the brain that danger is present. But when you breathe slowly, deeply, steadily, you send the opposite signal. The signal that the moment is safe. The signal that you are in control. The signal that discomfort can exist inside calm. Breath teaches the brain not to panic in intensity. Some people crumble under pressure, not because they are weak, but because they never learned to breathe through discomfort. Breath is the anchor that holds you in place while discomfort moves through you instead of taking over you. The next step is directing the mind. Discomfort pulls your attention toward fear, doubt, and exaggeration. It creates mental noise, frantic thoughts, catastrophic predictions, emotional flashbacks, memories of past failures. You quiet this noise, not by fighting it, but by focusing the mind on the next small action. Not the whole task, not the end result, just the next step. This reduces cognitive load. It shrinks the size of the challenge. It prevents your brain from drowning in its own storytelling. Discomfort becomes manageable when the mind remains here instead of racing ahead. Presence is power. The next layer is acceptance. Discomfort becomes unbearable only when you resist it. Resistance multiplies suffering. Acceptance dissolves it. Acceptance does not mean you enjoy discomfort. It means you stop arguing with it. You stop wishing it away. You stop interpreting it as a sign of failure. Acceptance allows discomfort to exist without defining you. When you accept the feeling, you reclaim control from it. The nervous system calms. The brain stabilizes. The body releases tension. Acceptance is strength. The next step is identity anchoring. A brain trained to embrace discomfort belongs to a person who believes they can handle anything. Identity shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcomes. When you see yourself as someone who endures, someone who adapts, someone who rises, your brain aligns with that identity. Your actions follow your identity, even when emotions don't. A person who believes they are capable of hard things moves into discomfort with less hesitation, less fear, less negotiation. They trust their resilience. They trust their recovery. They trust their ability to remain whole inside moments that once broke them apart. This trust is what rewires the brain at its deepest level. The next step is repetition. Embracing discomfort is not a single act. It is a practice, a muscle, a skill built through experience. The more often you choose discomfort, the more familiar it becomes. Familiarity kills fear, and fear is the guardian of your limitations. When fear weakens, your limitations dissolve. Repetition builds tolerance. Tolerance builds ease. Ease builds mastery. Mastery of discomfort is mastery of life, because every meaningful achievement requires discomfort. Every breakthrough requires tension. Every evolution requires stepping into territory your old self avoided. Discomfort sharpens you. It breaks the parts that were keeping you small, so the stronger parts can grow. The old you was built on comfort. The new you is built on friction. Friction polishes potential. This is why discomfort is sacred. It is the teacher that never lies, never flatters, never pretends. It reveals who you truly are and who you can become. When you train your brain to embrace discomfort, you become unstoppable. Not because life becomes easier, but because difficulty no longer feels threatening. Your nervous system adapts, your emotional tolerance expands, your psychological resilience strengthens. You stop breaking under pressure. You begin rising because of pressure. Discomfort becomes your compass, your training ground, your transformation tool. And every time you step into it, you step deeper into the version of yourself you were always meant to become. This is the power of a mind trained to embrace discomfort. It does not avoid. It advances. It does not fear. It understands. It does not collapse. It expands. This is how you build a brain capable of doing hard things. A brain that welcomes growth instead of resisting it. A brain that sees discomfort not as suffering, but as evolution. And once your mind learns to embrace discomfort, the world opens in a way it never has before. Because nothing is out of reach for someone who no longer fears the feeling required to achieve it. Chapter 8. Expanding your mental capacity through challenge. Your mind grows only when it is pushed beyond what it already knows. Challenge is the weight that strengthens the brain. The same way resistance strengthens a muscle. Without pressure, the mind stays small. Without friction, the mind stays soft. Without challenge, the mind stays unchanged. Mental capacity is not fixed. It is elastic, stretchable, expandable, trainable, but it expands only under the right conditions, only under the conditions created by challenge. Challenge is the catalyst of a powerful mind. It is the environment where potential wakes up and limitations fall apart. What most people call too much is simply the edge of their current capacity. An edge is not a wall. It is an invitation, a moment where the mind whispers, "I have never been here before," and you have the chance to answer, "That is exactly why I must go further." Your mental capacity expand the moment you step into territory your old self avoided. The brain adapts to what it faces. If it faces ease, it becomes weak. If it faces challenge, it becomes powerful. Challenge creates cognitive stretch. Cognitive stretch creates neural growth. Neural growth creates new capability. This stretch begins with demand, not overwhelming demand, but steady, rising demand, a pressure that pushes you slightly beyond your comfort, but not so far that you collapse. The nervous system grows when exposed to discomfort that is strong enough to stimulate if you anesthetize are of tummen of the wind show tiong, for tummen to motion summon, for patummen stipping than our ice and stipammen out of tut, and ordeal after your fune, to honor is the fits to fodiu mr. But not strong enough to break. This is the sweet spot where mental expansion happens. Challenge breaks the pattern your brain is trapped in. When your mind experiences something it has never faced, it cannot rely on old pathways. It must build new ones. These new pathways become the structure for increased mental capacity. The brain grows through work that requires focus, work that requires patience, work that requires resilience, not work that feels easy, not work that matches your current ability, work that stretches your ability in the direction you want to become. Challenge forces the mind to activate dormant neural circuits that were always there, waiting to be awakened by something demanding enough to require their use. Your mind has far more potential than it expresses on a daily basis, but potential is silent until challenge calls it forth. Every time you face something that seems slightly beyond your reach, your brain lights up. It enters a state of heightened adaptation. This state is a biological gift, the plasticity window, a window where learning happens faster, growth becomes easier, and your mental capacity expand more rapidly than usual. The plasticity window opens only under challenge, not comfort, not repetition alone, not ease. Growth requires friction, the friction of thinking differently, the friction of staying focused longer, the friction of handling bigger responsibilities, the friction of facing uncertainty without retreating. This friction is the sculptor of a strong mind. The next layer of expansion comes from sustained challenge. A single challenge can awaken the mind. Repeated challenges transform the mind. Capacity grows when you repeatedly do things you are not yet good at. Repeating only what you already know keeps capacity stagnant. Repeating what you cannot yet do expands it. The human brain is built to adapt to the demands placed upon it. Place weak demands, get a weak brain. Place strong demands, get a strong brain. You must train your mind the way an athlete trains their body, with progressive challenge. Progressive challenge means slowly increasing difficulty as your capacity grows. Increase intensity, increase duration, increase complexity, increase emotional tolerance. Each increase pushes your brain into the next level of capability. The most powerful transformation comes from compounding challenges, the kind that build on each other, day after day, until the mind grows accustomed to demanding environments. Challenge becomes normal, effort becomes familiar, struggle becomes expected, and when struggle becomes expected, resistance fades. The next layer of mental expansion is cognitive load management. Your brain cannot expand under chaos. It expands under structured demand. When the mind is overwhelmed, it shuts down. When the mind is underwhelmed, it becomes lazy. Expansion requires a balance between pressure and clarity. The task should feel challenging, but not confusing, demanding, but not impossible, stretching, but not destabilizing. This balance keeps the brain in the zone where growth is maximized. The next part is emotional exposure. Challenge is not only mental, it is emotional. Your emotional system controls your cognitive system. If your emotions collapse in difficulty, your mind collapses with them. But when you learn to stay emotionally steady, inside challenge, your mental capacity increases at an accelerated rate. Emotional endurance is the amplifier of cognitive capacity. A mind that does not panic can think clearly. A mind that thinks clearly can perform under pressure. This is why great performers in any field train themselves to remain calm inside difficulty. Calm expands cognition. Panic shrinks it. Challenge teaches you calm. Every time you enter discomfort and resist the urge to escape, your emotional tolerance increases. This increased tolerance allows your brain to handle higher levels of difficulty without becoming overwhelmed. Your capacity expands because your emotional system can now support bigger demands. The next piece is the concept of threshold shifting. Your brain has thresholds, limits where effort feels unbearable. Challenge pushes you against these thresholds. And when you touch that edge and remain there, even briefly, the threshold moves, not dramatically, but enough to change who you are tomorrow. Every small shift compounds. Every new threshold reached becomes the foundation. The bulbous pause becomes the bouquet to pukambats to buraini weak, bukenid would cunny eritsnidetheklit. For the next, this slow, steady shifting is how a person transforms from someone who avoids difficulty into someone who thrives in it. The next element is attention training. Your mental capacity is limited not by intelligence, but by your ability to hold focus in the presence of discomfort. Challenge demands attention. A wandering mind collapses under challenge. A trained mind endures it. When you use challenge as a focus-building tool, your concentration deepens. The brain strengthened the circuits for sustained effort. It becomes better at locking in, blocking distractions, and staying engaged long enough to break through resistance. This heightened focus spills into every part of your life. You think more clearly, you process faster, you make better decisions. Focus is the power source of expanded mental capacity. Challenge teaches the brain to access deeper layers of focus than ordinary life requires. The next layer is goal-based expansion. Your brain expands when it works toward a target that requires more of you than your current ability. The target forces adaptation. Adaptation forces improvement. The goal becomes the pressure that raises your cognitive ceiling. Small goals produce small growth. Big goals produce big growth. Not because you achieve them, but because you become the type of mind capable of sustaining pursuit without collapse. Challenge is not about reaching the goal. Challenge is about who you become in the pursuit of the goal. The next layer is adversity tolerance. Life will challenge you, whether you choose challenge or not. But when you train yourself to step into difficulty willingly, you build the resilience to endure difficulty unwillingly. You stop breaking in adversity because you have practiced the mental posture required to survive it. A mind familiar with challenge does not collapse when life demands strength. It rises, it adapts, it stabilizes. This stability is the mark of expanded mental capacity. The final layer is identity. You expand your mental capacity when you see yourself as someone built to handle challenge. Identity changes everything. A fragile identity avoids difficulty. A strong identity seeks it, not for suffering, for growth. You become someone who no longer fears being stretched, who no longer retreats from pressure, who no longer hides from the edges of their potential. A person who embraces challenge becomes a person who can handle anything. Your mental capacity expands to match the identity you hold. Hold the identity of someone strong, and your mind strengthens. Hold the identity of someone capable, and your mind adapts. Hold the identity of someone resilient, and your mind evolves. You were never limited by your potential. You were limited by the challenges you avoided. Now that you no longer avoid them, your mind begins to unfold in ways it never has before. Challenge is the catalyst. You are the transformation. And the brain you are building through this journey is becoming unstoppable. Chapter 9. Building psychological resilience through hard choices. Hard choices are the moments that shape the architecture of your mind. They are the points in life where your comfort ends and your character begins. Psychological resilience is not built on easy days or light decisions. It is built in the heavy spaces, the spaces where you must choose growth over relief, discipline over desire, and long-term strength over short-term comfort. Your brain becomes resilient when it learns that difficulty is not danger. Hard choices teach the mind that stress is survivable, uncertainty is manageable, and pressure is not the end of safety, but the beginning of expansion. When you stand in front of a hard choice, your nervous system first reacts with doubt, hesitation, and resistance. This is your brain's instinct to keep you within familiar territory. It is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that you have reached the edge of your current resilience. Not after everything feels safe. Resilience is the ability to move forward with fear still present, but no longer in control who you are becoming. They teach you how to endure discomfort without collapsing into old patterns. They teach you how to stay grounded when everything around you pushes you toward the easier escape. The mind becomes stable through exposure to instability. Not chaos, but the kind of instability that challenges your patience, tests your clarity, and requires you to hold yourself steady when processes get slow, when results take time, and when pressure rises. Hard choices slow you down, long enough to see the truth inside yourself. They expose the excuses, the insecurities, the fears that normally hide under routine and distraction. When you face these inner barriers, without running, they lose their power, and you gain yours. Psychological resilience grows in the exact moment where you want to quit, but don't. That moment rewires the brain. It reinforces the belief that you can outlast the emotional storm. It teaches your mind that it can endure more than it previously believed. Every difficult choice is like a weight in the gym. Your mind struggles under it, pushes through it, and becomes stronger because of it. Avoid the weight, and the mind weakens. Lift the weight, and the mind grows. Resilience is not a gift. It is a skill, and like any skill, it only grows through repetition, but not repetition of ease, repetition of difficulty, repetition of facing situation, repetition of published coincide power that stretch your patience, your emotional stability, and your ability to remain intentional under pressure. Hard choices create identity, integrity. They align your actions with the person you want to be. When you choose something hard for the sake of your growth, your self-trust increases. Self-trust is the foundation of resilience. It is the belief that you will not abandon yourself when things get difficult. Most people lose resilience because they break promises to themselves. They retreat when discomfort rises. They sacrifice long-term stability for short-term relief. They choose the path that lets them avoid tension, not the path that teaches them strength. You must reverse this pattern. Choose the option that forces you to stretch. Choose the option that teaches you endurance. Choose the option that requires patience, long-term thinking, and emotional discipline. Not because pain is noble, but because challenge is necessary. Resilience grows when you stop negotiating with your excuses. Hard choices simplify life. They cut through the noise and reveal what matters. They show you the difference between desire and direction, between impulse and intention, between comfort and purpose. Resilience is the ability to remain loyal to your purpose, even when your impulses beg you to turn away. There are 3 stages to building psychological resilience through hard choices. The first stage is resistance. When you encounter a hard decision, your mind instantly tries to protect you from discomfort. It generates fear, doubt, and emotional tension. This is not failure. This is the natural response of a brain trying to keep you safe by keeping you unchanged. The second stage is acceptance. You realize the discomfort will not destroy you. You realize the uncertainty is survivable. You realize the fear is simply the sensation of stepping beyond your old self. Acceptance reduces panic and creates clarity. The third stage is action. This is where resilience forms. Action under fear is the moment the brain rewires itself. It breaks the association between discomfort and danger. It replaces it with the association between discomfort and growth. This new association is the core of resilience. It transforms the mind from avoiding hard things to seeking the strength that only hard things create. Resilience is also built by repeatedly choosing alignment over emotion. Your emotions will want relief. Your purpose will need endurance. Your mind becomes resilient when you learn to honor your purpose more than your feelings. Ignoring emotions. It means holding the emotion without letting it control the direction. Identity is the anchor that keeps you steady in the storms of uncertainty. When you see yourself as someone who does hard things stop frightening you. When you see yourself as someone who can endure pressure stops overwhelming you. When you see yourself as someone capable of sacrifice, Sacrifice becomes a normal part of growth. Your identity dictates your resilience, and hard choices shape your identity. The more difficult decisions you make, the clearer and stronger your self-image becomes. Resilience is also built through emotional exposure. When you voluntarily step into emotionally intense situation and remain steady, your mind learns that it can survive storms without losing control. This exposure raises your emotional threshold. It widens your window of tolerance. It increases your ability to operate effectively, and even when emotions are loud, a resilient mind can feel deeply and still choose correctly. Hard choices teach you to sit with discomfort without collapsing. They teach you to move forward while carrying doubt. They teach you to remain patient even when impatience burns. Resilience is the quiet strength that emerges when you stay committed long after the initial motivation fades. Hard choices build that commitment. They force you to keep promises, even when the emotional cost rises. They teach you to stay disciplined, even when the mind seeks escape. Through this repetition, your psychological resilience evolves into something unshakable. You become the kind of person who does not break under pressure, who does not retreat under stress, who does not crumble when life demands something greater. You become a person who can hold difficulty without losing direction, hold uncertainty without losing stability, hold pressure without losing yourself. This is resilience, not the absence of struggle, but the presence of strength. Hard choices are the training ground for that strength. They are the forge, where your mind is reshaped into something capable of carrying the weight of the life you want. Every hard choice you make adds a layer of steel to your character. Every hard decision you face and overcome adds another layer to your psychological armor. Eventually, you stop fearing difficulty. You stop avoiding challenge. You stop shrinking when life grows heavy. You begin to walk toward the hard things because you know you are built to handle them. This is resilience, earned by, forged, and strengthened through the choices most people avoid. And now, you are no longer most people. You are someone who understands that the hard path is the path that builds you. Chapter 10. Transforming your brain into a lifelong warrior mindset. A warrior mindset is not about aggression. It is not about force. It is not about domination. A warrior mindset is a mental state built on clarity, discipline, resilience, and an unshakable commitment to your purpose. It is the ability to stay grounded when life becomes heavy, to remain centered when emotions rise, and to continue moving when the path grows dark. A warrior does not fight the world. A warrior masters the self. And this mastering begins in the brain, in the thoughts you choose, the habits you build, the discomforts you embrace, and the identity you shape as you walk through difficulty. Your brain becomes a warrior when it learns that challenge is a teacher, fear is an indicator, pressure is a sculptor, and struggle is a passageway to greater strength. The warrior mindset is not born, it is trained. It is shaped by years of choosing the harder path, the slower path, the disciplined path, the path that forces growth, even when comfort is begging you to stay the same. This transformation begins with awareness, a deep, honest awareness of how your mind currently behaves under pressure. A warrior does not deny weaknesses. A warrior studies them, understands them, and rebuilds them into strength. Weakness is not failure. Weakness is the raw material from which strength is built. Your brain learns to operate like a warrior when it stops collapsing into emotion and starts standing inside intention. Not because the emotion fades, but because the intention becomes stronger. A warrior mindset is built through repetition. Repetition of discipline, repetition of resilience, repetition of showing up on the days when nothing feels easy and everything feels slow. This repetition rewires your brain. It teaches the mind that commitment is not a feeling, It is an identity. You train your brain to become a warrior. When you keep going, long after the initial motivation disappears, anyone can begin with excitement. Only a warrior continues with discipline. The brain recognizes your patterns. If you quit often, your brain learns to stop trying. If you push through resistance, your brain learns that resistance is not a signal to stop. It is a signal to rise. Every time you do something difficult without escaping, your brain rewires itself to become stronger in the face of struggle. The warrior mindset also grows through emotional stability, not suppression, not denial, but stability. The ability to hold emotion without losing clarity. When your emotions rise and you remain centered, your brain develops neural pathways that associate calm with moments of intensity. This is a rare skill, and this is what separates warriors from the world. A warrior can feel deeply without becoming overwhelmed. A warrior can think clearly inside chaos. A warrior can decide wisely under pressure. This stability is trained in the small moments, the moments when irritation wants control, when impatience wants escape, when frustration wants reaction. The warrior mindset is formed by repeatedly choosing self-control over impulse, over distraction, purpose over comfort. When the brain learns these choices, it becomes a reliable partner instead of an unpredictable enemy. Another pillar of the warrior mind is identity construction. How you see yourself determines how your brain behaves under stress. If you see yourself as fragile, your brain will collapse under pressure. If you see yourself as capable, your brain will rise under pressure. If you see yourself as someone who can weather storms, your brain prepares itself to survive storms. Identity is the command center of your mental resilience. A warrior mindset is built when your self-image aligns with strength. When you stop seeing yourself as someone struggling to survive and start seeing yourself as someone built to endure, this shift changes everything. Your habits change, your posture changes, your energy changes, your decisions change, your tolerance for discomfort increases, your ability to stay focused deepens. Identity is the engine behind the warrior mind. Once your identity changes, your brain begins to operate on a new level of resilience. Another key element is long-term thinking. A warrior does not think in moments. A warrior thinks in outcomes. A warrior does not think in emotions. A warrior thinks in direction. When you train your brain to look beyond the present moment, you remove the power of temporary discomfort. You begin seeing hardship as part of a larger journey instead of an isolated struggle. This long-term lens reduces panic and increases perspective. It reminds the brain that pain is temporary, but growth is permanent. A warrior endures today because a warrior is focused on tomorrow. Your brain also becomes a warrior through controlled exposure, the consistent practice of placing yourself newly, to eindersit frivia, zalshive, you kämpfen tamalatiama, in situations that stretch you, not traumatize you, not destroy you, stretch you. When you consistently stretch your limits expand. Your mind grows comfortable with higher pressure, higher responsibility, higher intensity. Eventually, what once felt overwhelming becomes ordinary. What once felt difficult becomes manageable. What once felt impossible becomes a normal part of who you are. This is how warriors are built, through gradual, intentional, consistent exposure to the hard things most people avoid. The final pillar of the warrior mind is self-command. A warrior does not wait for perfect conditions. A warrior does not wait to feel ready. A warrior does not negotiate with excuses. A warrior acts. A warrior moves. A warrior chooses direction over hesitation and discipline over doubt. Self-command is the internal authority that tells your mind, this is who we are now. And this is what we do. Self-command builds trust. Trust builds confidence. Confidence builds resilience. Resilience builds an unbreakable mind. This is the cycle that forms a warrior. When you begin exercising self-command, your brain stops fighting you and starts following you. It adapts to your authority. It listens to your decisions. It aligns with your purpose. Once your brain follows your command, you are no longer controlled by impulse, fear, or resistance. You become someone who chooses your path intentionally, lives your values consistently, and builds your strength deliberately. A warrior mind is not impulsive. It is intentional. It is not chaotic. It is disciplined. It is not fragile. It is forged. Your brain becomes a warrior the moment you choose direction over emotion, discipline over comfort, and growth over escape. When you live this way long enough, your mind transforms. It becomes steady, focused, resilient, unshakable. You stop breaking when life becomes heavy. You stop retreating when challenges appear. You stop doubting when pressure rises. You begin to carry yourself with a strength that does not need to be spoken. People feel it. Life responds to it. Your future is shaped by it. A lifelong warrior mindset is not about heroism. It is about alignment, aligning your habits with your purpose, your decisions with your identity, your actions with your potential. When this alignment becomes natural, you no longer fear difficult things. You seek them, because you know difficult things build the person you were meant to become. Your brain was not built to break. It was built to evolve. It was built to strengthen. It was built to rise. You are now stepping into that design. You are becoming the person capable of doing hard things. Not once, not occasionally, but for a lifetime. This is the warrior mindset, the mind that endures, the mind that adapts, the mind that transcends. And from this moment forward, your brain will never operate the same way again. You have trained it. You have shaped it. You have transformed it. You are no longer just surviving life. You are meeting life with the strength of someone who refuses to break. This is your new identity. This is your new foundation. This is your lifelong warrior mind, and it will carry you into every challenge ahead with a power that cannot be shaken.